Chapter 153 to 155. There were naturally a few problems with the Kagaya clan members when they woke up. The 60 women did their best to persuade the older teenage girls to be cooperative while calming down the kids. Unfortunately, 20 of the most crazed ones had to have their memories adjusted and were promptly dumped back into the Kagaya village the following night, with their last memory being going to sleep 2 days ago. Yuzushio didn't need crazed Kagaya-style gangbang, loving masochistic fanatics. Not like they could reveal what they experienced, even if their memories somehow restored themselves. The secrecy seals were already in place the second they used the portal. The kids were trickier, though. These couldn't just be discarded, because they could still be raised to accept their situation. Temper tantrums were a common sight that day. Thankfully, the Kagaya clan tempered their kids with some tough, steely love with the appearance of a cane so crying was not a habit the Kagaya children had. Rei decided to follow a simple rule. Desperate times call for a desperate solution. He showered the kids in modern board or card games while offering them candy and chocolate. In short, he used honey trap, and it worked spectacularly. As expected of me, cough, cough. Rei smugly thought about his achievements, while giving the disbelieving Tsunade and Conan a meaningful look. Superpowers or not, kids will be kids. Just look at Ophis. In the end, the number of the Kagaya clansmen who accepted their situation was 272. Most of these were women, and the males were only kids under 5 years old. This was because of the Kagaya customs, which clearly stated any boy aged 5 or above had to start the clan training, which usually started with a bucket load of brainwashing to be loyal to their clan first and foremost, to the point of sacrificing their lives for it. Alas, these kids simply were just not worth the effort in Rei's eyes. But Rei was patient, and he could wait a decade or so for his Kagaya clan members to grow. No pressure, especially the Lil crying bundle that was stolen from the house of the Kagaya clan head, Little Kimimaro. Yuzushio now had 2 clans, Uzumaki and Kagaya. For now, both lived in the same compound, which was quite intentionally done by Rei, so these people could grow closer to each other. Rei would not suffer internal clan disputes in his own village. Being at odds in certain situations was fine, but if he could make them understand and help each other, teach them how to work together instead of against each other from the start, Rei would try his damnedest to do so. This also came with the added benefit of Uzumaki teaching Kagaya kids their ways, whether they were about the love for their family or the reverence they had for Rei. Maybe I should stop copying Orochimaru. Rei thought about the prospects of having the Kagaya kids grow up into his fanatics, due to the care of the ever-so-loyal Uzumaki. Then again, maybe not. After all, Orochimaru was the favorite pupil of Sarutobi. He knows his stuff when it comes to manipulating impressionable children. Surprisingly, the Uzumaki clan members were steadily learning and developing their sealing arts. For now, it was nothing extraordinary, but they could ease up the time of Rei's clones that had to keep up with creating the supply of goods for the Bairi company. So Rei could delegate more research work to these, while paying the Uzumaki sealers a commission for making the seals in his stead. The other thing the Uzumaki clan, and even some civilians, showed an interest in was forging. And for forging, they needed metal. Simply said, Rei decided to start hiring miners and reopen the chakra metal and iron ore mine near Yuzushio. The Yuzushio of old was the main supplier of chakra metal in the world, and the mines were far from depleted. Naturally, like with farmers, Rei made sure the miners had an easier job than normal. Instead of carts, there were storage scrolls. The pickaxes were all enhanced with seals and had a special feature of adding weight to every swing. The miners didn't even have to be that strong for these pickaxes to be effective. Honestly, Rei could make some automated mining factory with seals and his rock clones, but this was a good way to broaden the number of jobs in the village. Just like that, the storage houses in the village that previously contained only crops now started to be filled with storage scrolls containing a whole lot of chakra metal, iron, gold, silver, and more. The future Yuzushio Trading Company gained their first saleable commodity. The next thing Rei put the effort into were docks. Creating ships was not hard since Rei, Tsunade, Conan, or even their clones could do so without any hassle with just a few hours a day and a bit of effort put into Mokutan shaping. Considering Yuzushio was an island nation, ships were important, and Rei made sure to put Mokutan and sealing arts together to create floating fortresses when it came to both defense and offense. The best part in Rei's opinion, however, was the natural camouflaging seals all over the hull that could make the ship invisible unless in close proximity. After all, why fight with pirates when you could show them the middle finger without them even noticing? The last part Rei needed was capable sailors, but that was quickly solved by secretly sending some capable men and women to the branch of the Bairi company that focused on naval trade, where they would learn under the supervision of an experienced captain. Rei could almost see how a year later they would return, and Yuzushio would gain their very own trading fleet. Just a year more and Yuzushio Trading Company can start operating. Rei smiled in content. Yes, the fleet was the last thing Yuzushio required before rejoining the world stage. And while Rei was doing all this, Tsunade was training carefully selected people in medical ninjutsu and knowledge needed for doctors. Thanks to the secrecy seals that improved the physique of the residents, nobody got ill for months now, so the hospital was not really needed. Only when a woman got pregnant she approached Tsunade's clone for a checkup, and there were even a few births, such as the young Karen Uzumaki, on whom Tsunade instantly called dibs, and the girl's future in the medical field became sealed. But apart from that, medics were not needed yet. Unfortunately, Tsunade was irked that she was the only one capable of doing these things, so she gathered her own pupils from those with exceptional chakra control and started their hellish fast-track training. Rei could only pity them, poor bruised saps. Conan, on the other hand, focused on creating a library. Naturally, there were no ninja arts, but the size was 5 times the library of a daimyo from a major nation. Any notable piece of paper that could enrich the knowledge of the residents, Conan gathered and put in there. She also made sure to hire 5 librarians who took care of the place, since she could not do so while creating the paperwork system of the village. Naturally, the village could not be without its leader. For now, that position was filled with Rei, but he knew Conan was already grooming Kaya Uzumaki for the position. Thankfully, there was no real resistance to that from the Uzumaki clan. Even the 20 members who came from the Bairi company didn't utter a single complaint. But while Rei could manage tons of paperwork with his clones, Kaya would be hopelessly outclassed. That's why Conan was creating a hierarchy and putting together a government system not much different from what was used for the Bairi company, only on a more concentrated scale. Basically, the leader would deal only with the most important stuff pertaining to the well-being of the village and its development, while under the leader, numerous heads of various departments would have their own paperwork, and so on and on. Well, Conan had it all thought out, so Rei didn't care much about it. The Yuzushio was slowly becoming more and more lively, especially since the people started to invent their own things, or ways to earn money, like the shrewd merchants they were educated to be. Just a few months passed since the establishment of Yuzushio, and yet, the place was already starting to thrive. Rei and Conan watched Yujito swing Samahata at Mei clad in her steam armor, and cleave through her as if she was made of paper. A bit away, the real Mei cursed at seeing that, gnashing her teeth at smug Ringo, who just won the bet of who has the better armor. The jutsu that previously made Mei invulnerable to any attack from the yellow flash was reduced to just an useless layer of steam in front of Samahata. So carefree, Rei chuckled, looking at the sky of his dimension. Isn't it fine? Being carefree, I mean. Conan sighed in contentment and leaned closer to Rei, who just lovingly pulled her even closer as they watched Mei trying to attack Yujito, who countered almost everything with Samahata or used her nimbleness to dodge. Mei was naturally not going all out, but she was using enough power to take down A-rank ninja without a problem. The improvement rate of Yujito was incredible, especially since she was taught shadow clones. That technique was really created for Jinchuriki. It has been a while since Yujito was recruited, and Rei was really astonished when he one day found himself in front of the kneeling blonde as she swore herself into his service while he was still half asleep due to just waking up. Rei had no idea how to feel about that. One part of him wanted to reject, but the other knew Yujito would be useful, so he dazedly nodded in acceptance at the time. Just like that, he earned himself a devoted kunoichi. At least she doesn't have any romantic feelings towards me. Rei felt immense relief, because that would be just awkward, since he didn't spend much time with the girl due to the last months being very busy. He saw her more like a cute little kitten living in his house. Mei's pet of a sort. So what about Konoha? Rei asked Conan, admiring how Yujito kicked Mei's chest and sent her flying back only to reveal it was just a clone. You mean the 9-tailed fluff that appeared and devastated quite a lot of the village while killing the 4th Hokage? Conan tilted her head. Meh, they will get back up on their feet. It will take years, but the peace treaty is still valid. No new war is coming. She shrugged in disinterest. And the Jinchuriki? Rei asked, wincing as Mei brutally slugged Yujito right into her right cheek. What Jinchuriki? The 4th supposedly killed the immortal beast, no? Conan sarcastically exclaimed in a mocking tone, while appreciating how Yujito returned the punch by kicking Mei's stomach. Rei derisively snorted. Please. I can't believe Konoha higher-ups are stupid and naive enough to hope other villages would believe a make-believe story, such as our Hokage killed the strongest Bijou. Cower before us. The entire thing is the biggest joke the entire elemental nation ever heard of. He rolled his eyes. It's as if the Konoha in their stress and panic completely forgot the other villages have their own Bijou and know their own fair bit about them. Yeah. Konoha is pretty much the laughingstock of the world right now. The only measure of respect they command is due to them winning the last war. Conan nodded, just as Mei's experimental sword blocked Samahata, which was promptly blown away by the seal incorporated into Mei's sword. Who would have thought the sword would actually work? Conan added with an interested smile. Yeah. Rei's lips also curled to a small smile. Ringo and Mei will eventually create incredible swords. To think their repelling sword would work so spectacularly to repel even Samahata. Rei said before kissing the temple of Conan's head to get her attention. So, back to my question. The Jinchuriki. Conan happily hummed, averting her pondering gaze from the sword, and stopping scheming about how easy it would be to steamroll through an army if her ninjas had these repelling swords, before starting to talk. In an orphanage, supposedly for his own protection. His status is apparently kept as an S-ranked secret. Except, Reikage received the report about the boy yesterday and Tsuchikage today. Heck, they even know his parentage. Both could care less whose son the brat is. They are well aware he would not receive proper training the second they heard about the rumors about the demon reincarnation into a small boy. So far, neither is interested since they have bigger problems on their hands due to the war just ending. In the end, it is just a simple attempt at manipulating a child by the third Hokage, huh? Hey WYY smiled. Damn it, if only the little brat was not a member of the Uzumaki clan. It would be all so much easier, he exclaimed while watching Yujito clash blades with Mei in a bitter endurance match, where neither of them had an advantage. You want to snatch the Kyuubi Jinchuriki? Conan turned towards Rei in astonishment, her gaze clearly asking, Are you serious? Maybe later. Rei dismissed the idea, but Conan knew what it meant. Rei could care less about the boy. I know our activities in the past year were a bit too concentrated on saving the poor and helpless, but we are not a charity, much less an orphanage for the unwanted. Conan shrugged, losing interest in the topic, and looked back towards the fight between Yujito and Mei. Yujito was keeping up only thanks to her status as a Jinchuriki, the fact she was holding Samahata, and due to Mei not brutally aiming at Yujito's body. Instead, Mei was only trying to disarm her. I have no idea what I am going to do. I can let the little guy suffer. I can help him. I can manipulate him. I can snatch him. Choices, and consequences. Rei mirthfully chuckled. He was still tempted to just let nature run its course, but maybe he could give it his own twist? And what about the case of the villages disappearing? Did the ninja villages finally give up their respective investigations? He changed the topic just as Mei managed to land a blow on Yujito, injuring her left upper arm. Let's see. Conan became a bit dazed as the information was relayed to her by her clone. Sunagakure already called it off, and just signed it off as some kind of unnatural sandstorm. The village was in a very remote and desolate area after all. Figures. Raza has other problems than 100 or so civilians going puff into the air. Rei nodded, already predicting this outcome. Oh, would you look at that? Yujito landed a right hook, just after dispelling Mei's smoke armor. The girl's instincts really are incredible. He excitedly smiled. Considering both refused to use large-scale ninjutsu, they are so-so, I would say. Conan commented with brutal honesty in her voice. Anyway, the Tsuchikage is acting as if nothing happened, not even a bit bothered by a few remote villages disappearing. He probably thinks it is the work of bandits taking the villagers and selling them as slaves. Considering he is not getting any request to rescue them, he firmly believes in no pay, no way policy. Good for us, then. Rei just smirked. Slaves were yet another good way to increase the population of his village, but he had to be careful and not attract much attention from Inoki. He was a bit afraid that clearing these villages out would somewhat put Inoki on guard and hinder this option, but now it just seemed as if Inoki was making it easy for Rei on purpose. Konoha has no idea, since we didn't take anyone from the Land of Fire. Kumogakure is seething and looking for the reason. Not that they would be able to figure it out. The problem is Kirigakure. Conan quieted down. Yeah, the corner of Rei's mouth twitched. Who would have known that taking away 300 Kaguya clan members would send the hot-blooded morons into a frenzy, and cause them to march straight towards Kirigakure, where they would attempt to massacre everything that moves. How stupid one had to be to attack a village with tens of thousands strong experienced force of killers, with only a few hundreds of combatants head-on. In short, the Kaguya clan was no more. At least, that was what the world believed. Alas, it would be a decade at the very least before Rei could prove the world wrong. Rei smiled and watched Yujito, and Mei shake each other's hands with smiles on their exhausted faces. Jinchuriki were quite capable and compatible with the clone training method. He sighed as he really had no idea what to do about Lil Ruto. Nevertheless, and so the plot begins. Rei reached his hand towards the fake sun in his dimension with determination shining in his eyes as he silently promised to himself, I am going to win. Pakura was slowly and leisurely walking towards Kiri, sent on a diplomatic mission by Raza. All around her were mist-filled forests, and her senses were flaring at her, telling her she was being followed, but she already expected that. The Kazekage himself told her it would happen, and she shouldn't be too worked over it. She accepted it. After all, Kirigakure would not just leave a foreign ninja roaming free on their land. Nevertheless, Pakura was still cautious and kept her guard up. She was almost halfway on her way towards the village through the land of water, when her senses flared into high heavens, and she only managed to whip out a kunai into each of her hands as her eyes widened. She nimbly started to deflect the flurry of projectiles flying her way, while acrobatically jumping from side to side, weaving through the trees and using their trunks as temporary shields. Pakura deflected the last projectile and glared into the mist, as she could feel her body getting numb from a small cut on her thigh. I am poisoned, she thought in panic and tried to counter the poison with her chakra, only for her stomach to sink when she found out it was impossible. Chakra poisoning and partial paralysis. How? This is a poison only Sunagakure can produce. Her mind completely halted. What's the meaning of this? Pakura screamed only for laughter to come out of the mist as 10 figures appeared. They were all clad in IWA shinobi attire, but what made her widen her eyes was that she recognized them. They were quite famous Kiri hunter ninjas. Why? She asked as her mind was swirling with possibilities. One shinobi smirked at her provocatively, his eyes clearly condescending as he twirled his chikudo in his hand. Well, Suna scum, wouldn't you like to know? Now, be a good girl and let us kill you. He smiled widely and Pakura's eyes steeled. There was no walking away from here, it seemed. She would have to fight. Pakura wasn't just standing while they talked. Her chakra was ready, and the second he finished his monologue, she pushed it to create 3 scorch-release orbs and combined them in a blink of an eye into one big flaming orb several times as high as she was. She held it with her chakra above her head, and with a snarl, she threw it onto the Kiri shinobi while jumping backward. White vapor exploded as the orb hit the ground and vaporized everything in its range. The vapor quickly spread and engulfed the entire battlefield, thickening the mist around even more. Pakura was in the process of conjuring more of her flaming orbs, while panting from exertion, due to pushing her chakra through the poison effects when she could feel her thigh to be pierced, forcing her to drop onto her knee and grit her teeth in pain. You bitch! You killed Akio! Another man shrieked, giving away his position. As she heard him from the mist, she raised her kunai, just in time to block a sword about to decapitate her. Shit! They are all masters at silent killing and moving through the mist. Pakura thought in despair, as she could barely see 3 meters in front of her. The sword stopped, and Pakura could feel yet another sunbon aimed at her other leg, and with a great deal of effort, she twisted her body into a roll, making the sunbon hit the ground. She sprang up and put her entire weight on her uninjured leg, as she protectively held her 2 kunai at the ready, while secretly kneading her chakra for her scorch release, as she started deflecting more and more sunbon flying her way while her back faced a tree. She was fucked and she knew it. The initial flurry poisoned her, and her body was getting number and number by the second. She could only move due to her extraordinarily strong chakra, coursing through her body, and somewhat forcefully mitigating the poison. A normal Suna Jonin would already be a completely paralyzed lump of flesh lying on the ground. Also, she was an agility-based shinobi. One of her legs useless basically meant game over for her. She steeled herself and decided to take as many of them down together with her. It was then that a right uncoated sword pierced the tree she was leaning on from behind, and her lower abdomen with it, making blood spurt from her mouth. She looked at the piece of sharp steel in her and lashed out with her orb, vaporizing the man behind the tree. With a painful groan, Pakura pushed the sword out of her body as she dropped on all 4, coughing blood while panting. She could feel the poison spreading through her body more and more as she slowly grew weaker and started to lose even the remaining control over her chakra. The remaining Kiri men appeared in front of her, smiling in amusement. Just give it up. You won dash. That was as far as the man got before Pakura's kunai embedded itself into his forehead. This, however, alerted the others, and her follow-up scorch orbs missed. Pakura cursed and stood up. Well, if I am to die, you are coming with me. She brokenly smiled, her eyes the picture of exhaustion as she was pressing on the wound on her bleeding abdomen. 3 flaming orbs appeared around her, and the bloody clash in the mist-covered forest continued. Pakura sat beaten, leaning her back onto the tree as her right hand was raised upward, pierced through the palm with kunai to the tree. One of her legs, the one that was previously hit by a sunbon, was completely numb while the other was broken at the knee, twisted at an unnatural angle. That was not as worrying as the fact it was lying in front of her unattached to her body. Her other arm was full of cuts and senbons pierced it in many places as she used it to shield herself in desperation, while the men laughed and jeered as they used her as a target for throwing practice. They were actually surprised she could still move it after the 50th sunbon pierced it. They clearly didn't aim for anything vital, but instead focused on the painful spots. The men stopped throwing and quiet ensued in the clearing. Pakura raised her head to see them approaching her and took a shuddering breath as she coughed blood, making the trail of blood flowing from the sides of her mouth even redder. How she would like to vaporize these men. But whatever poison they used, it was specifically engineered against her. She was unable to control her chakra fluidly. Well, she could, but not enough to throw her bloodline around anymore. Her best bet was taijutsu and kunai, but her body was already a wreck. No, this was game over, and she knew it as tears trailed down her cheeks. She only wanted to know one thing. Why? She rasped out as she looked at the 3 men. She managed to kill 7 of them. All of them elite Jonin level. That was what earned her the current torture they were putting her through. If she didn't kill them, her head would roll, and it would at least be painless. One of the men scowled at her question and sighed as he crouched down in front of her and grabbed her hair, yanking her head up to look at him. Why? He smirked condescendingly. Suna offered you in exchange for peace. Hero of the Suna. He mocked, gleefully enjoying Pakura's shaking eyes at the revelation that this was not a coincidence. This was your last mission from the start, bitch. He slapped her cheek, a large bruise appearing on it. Rensatsu. A man next to him started, but was cut off with the scoff from Rensatsu. Pakura still couldn't believe she was sold to Kiri. She sacrificed her entire life for the village. Academy, training, war, more training, training disciple. She had never had time for herself. She gave herself to Sunagakure, and this was how she was repaid? With wide eyes, she stared in horror at the 3 men as her throat went dry. It was so unfair. I know, Akabo. Rensatsu, the man crouching in front of Pakura, said in annoyance. I won't hit her again. Good. Akabo grinned as his hand went to his pants. I was really looking forward to this. He eyed Pakura's broken and bloody body with a want in his eyes, making her shudder. She knew what would follow. Hours upon hours of being their sex toy. She stared at them in despair, unable to move. This is it. Tears streamed down her cheeks with even bigger intensity as she watched 2 men unbuckle their pants, leering at her, while the third went away in annoyance, clearly disgusted but uncaring to her plight. She shakily stuck her tongue slightly out between her teeth. She would prefer a swift and painful end rather than a miserable and humiliating one. She was about to bite her tongue off as her eyes closed. Her mind was hazy and afraid, confused due to the revelation she was sold out by her own, no less. She was shaken enough to let out the only thing, the first thing that came to her mind. Help, please. I don't want to die, yet. She sobbed, but it was obvious no help would come. She was here to be slaughtered, set up by her own Kage. Her thoughts suddenly shifted into a desperate wail, as a mad determination showed in her exhausted eyes. Sunagakure, Raza, I curse you to hell. Pakura forcefully bit down on her tongue.
Cliff-kun. Yaho.